This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, welcome everyone. Tonight's topic is a very sensitive issue, and let's begin with words of introduction. Please do not rely on what we learned tonight, halacha l'maisa, even though I'm sure you know that if you don't rely on shiurim, halacha l'maisa, shiur is to learn the inyan, and if you want to know what to do, you always have to ask your Rav. But especially tonight, it's a very sensitive subject. We're going to bring down the opinions of Rabbi Moshe Feinstein and the Tzitz Eliezer, but we're going to conclude with a few dissenting arguments. And certainly I'm not qualified to disagree with any of those poskim, but I do want to bring to your attention possibly another way of looking at it and making it a little bit unclear of what to do l'maisa, but you should be aware of the issue. Okay, so basically at the end of this week's Parsha, we have to find some kind of connection to the Parsha, as nebulous as it may be. At the end of the Parsha, we have the episode of Miriam speaking Lashon Hara about Moshe. It says, Vayidaber Miriam, about Moshe Rabbeinu, al oidois isha hakushis asher lokach. They spoke about the Cushite woman that Moshe Rabbeinu took. Even though Moshe Rabbeinu did not marry a Cushite woman, it doesn't say he did not marry a black woman. It just means, Rashi says, just like everybody, when they look at someone who is black, nobody disputes the color, so too, Sipira, nobody disputed her beauty. That's all it means, Isha Kushis. But nevertheless, the Torah is describing some type of Lashon Hara that Miriam spoke about Moshe Rabbeinu in regards to his marriage. Most specifically, they criticized Moshe Rabbeinu for separating from Tzipora. They said, who does Moshe Rabbeinu think he is? Avram Avinu never separated from Sarah, as holy as Avraham was, as holy as any of the Nevi'im were. They never separated from their spouse. So why does Moshe Rabbeinu have to separate from Tzipora? But bottom line is, the Torah speaks about some form of Lashon Hara that Miriam spoke about Moshe Rabbeinu's marriage. So the topic we're going to discuss tonight is speaking Lashon Hara in terms of Shidduchim. For example, let's say you know information about a prospective Kala or prospective Chassan. And if the other party would know about it, they never would want to get involved in the Shidduch. Let's say you know that one of the parties has a terminal illness or some type of medical condition or some type of psychological condition. And if you go ahead and reveal it to the other party, there's no way in a million years that the other party is going to go through with the Shidduch. Are you allowed to divulge information? Is it a mitzvah? Is it an obligation? And what about the person themselves? Can a person themselves, knowing about their own shortcomings, offer themselves knowing that they have this deficiency? So that's what we're going to discuss tonight. We begin with the Sefer Chasidim. Sefer Chasidim was written by one of the Rishonim, Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi, and he writes very openly that even if you have a family member, you're not allowed to cover up their mumim, their deficiencies, if they need to get married. So, for example, if they have a sickness, that if the other party would know about it, they would not want to marry them, then you got to tell them. Doesn't matter. They could be your brother, your sister, your father, your mother. Otherwise, the marriage is primed for disaster. Or says the Sefer Chasidim, if you know they're bad, you know they have ma'asim ro'im, and if the other person would know about it, they wouldn't want to get married. You got to tell them. Or let's say regarding tzedakah, you see a guy walking down Central Avenue or Main Street, and he's carrying his tu'dah from the Vadarabanim of Five Towns, Vadarabanim of Queens, wherever it is, and you know the guy's a phony. You know he has $2 million sitting in the bank, and he's collecting tzedakah. And if you would tell some of the prospective donors about it, they're not going to give the money. You got to tell them. Now, at first we have to know, this is the Sefer Chasidim. Is there really an obligation to follow what it says in Sefer Chasidim? It's not necessarily a Sefer of Piskei Halacha. It's recommended to follow, but it might not be absolute halacha to follow what it says in Sefer Chasidim. So let's examine what some of the poskim say. And some of these issues are extremely sensitive. So for example, take a look at number 2 on your sheets. This is a woman, a young woman, who's writing Rav Moshe Feinstein. Obviously she felt comfortable enough to divulge this information, but basically she's a 19-year-old girl who in her past she was promiscuous, she was mazaneh, and now she's in the Parsha, she became Shomer Torah Mitzvos, she's becoming observant, and she's in the Parsha, as they say. She's going out with the guy, And she wants to know, is she required to tell the guy, look, last year, 2 years ago, 5 years ago, I did the A, B, and C, I was mezaneh. Is she required to tell the prospective chassan? Well, says Rav Moshe, by the way, this woman is asking in terms of, she's asking Rav Moshe, how could she do tshuva, how could she rectify what she did? But as part of her question, she wants to know, is she obligated to divulge to the chassan what she did in her past? Well, says Rav Moshe as follows. She is 1,000% obligated to tell the prospective chassan what she did. She can't keep it to herself. However, says Rav Moshe, she's not required to say it like on the first date. It's not like he calls her up. Yeah, where do you want to go? I want to go to the Brooklyn Marriott, and I just want to let you know that last year, that's not recommended, says Rav Moshe. Not only is that not a good idea, says Rav Moshe, she's not allowed to say immediately what she did. So I was wondering, why is she not allowed to say? Well, probably because she has a mitzvah to get married, so she's basically shooting herself in the leg. So she should go out with the guy. And at what point should she tell him? Very interesting. Moshe says like this: when she knows for sure that he wants to marry her, they're starting to talk about getting married. They're starting to talk about getting engaged, and she's positive that he is interested in her. Then she should, at that point in time, she should let him know. Because if she says anything earlier than that, he's just not going to be interested. He's going to turn her down. So therefore, he needs to wait. She should wait until she knows that he's interested. At that point in time, she should divulge the information. And she should say it in the following way. She has to play it smart. She should say, one time, I didn't have my guard about me, and I met someone, and he cajoled me, and he persuaded me, and it wasn't my fault. I didn't have my head on straight that day, and I didn't realize what was happening. But you should know this will never happen again, and I know to be careful in the future. And if she says it, it's right, like they say, timing is everything. If she says it at the right time, and if she says it in the right way, then he will very likely go through with the shidduch. But again, Rav Moshe says she would be obligated to divulge information, provided that it is at the correct time, and provided that she does it in the right way. What about the following scenario? This is Igros Moshe, Even Oezer, Chilek Daled, Siman Ayin Gimel. There's a 25-year-old guy, and he suffers from a condition. I'm not familiar with the condition. You let me know if you ever heard of it. The name of the condition is Tasmunas Marfen, or Marpan syndrome. Marfan syndrome. What's that?
Marfan is a problem with your skin and your collagen.
And what?
Collagen. It's a skin and connective tissue.
Skin and connective tissue. Okay, thank you. I asked this morning, nobody knew. So you see, 1 out of 100. There you go.
How many physicians were there?
What?
How many physicians were there?
How many neighbors did you ask?
Right. Well, here, the way Rav Moshe describes the condition, he says it causes heart weakness, blindness, and weakness of the nervous system. Okay, I don't know how common this condition is, and under certain very severe forms of it, the person needs some type of cardiac operation, and sometimes it leads to blindness. And somehow this woman did not realize that the guy has a syndrome. He's 25 years old, and now here's the problem. If she marries him, it's a dominant gene. So in that case, what percent of the children are going to have the syndrome? 50%. Now, it doesn't have to be. They could have 10 kids and none of them have it. They could have 10 kids and all of them have it. So it's basically, the odds are, since it's a dominant gene and presumably she doesn't have it, so it's 50-50. Well, says Rav Moshe, here's the shaila. This guy, basically, if he gets married to a woman who's able to rear children, to bear children, 50% of his kids are going to be loyalenu stricken with this disease, this syndrome. Is he, number one, allowed to get married? Okay. Maybe who says he can get married? He's going to be bringing in, he has children, half of them, percentage-wise, are going to be coming to this world with a very, very terrible existence. Is he allowed to get married? Is he obligated to get married? Says Rav Moshe as follows. If he could find a woman who will know about his condition, says Rav Moshe, in parentheses, avada, he's chayiv to tell the woman about the condition. He cannot hide it. So says Rav Moshe, if a person has a serious condition, he cannot hide the condition. The same way, if you're selling someone a car, So let's say you drive a Honda Civic. I drive a Honda Civic. If I were to go and take somebody's label, I rip off somebody's Lexus label and put it over my car. Now, anybody with half a brain would realize right away this ain't no Lexus. If you know anything about cars, doesn't look like it, doesn't smell like a Lexus, doesn't quack like a Lexus. It ain't a Lexus. But let's say I would do that. So it's trickery, it's robbery. You can't do that. So says Rabbi Moshe, the same thing with marriage. You can't trick someone. You can't fool someone. So says Rabbi Moshe, this person would certainly have to let the woman know that he has the condition. But if she agrees to take him, then he should certainly marry her to be mekayim the mitzvah puravu. The kids are 50-50. They're going to have the disease. Says Rabbi Moshe, first of all, it's not 50-50. Just because the odds are 50-50, it doesn't mean they'll for sure have the disease. You marry, you daven to Hashem, and you hope for the best, and you could have 10 kids, and none of them have the disease. So a person would be entitled to do that. But says Rav Moshe, even if you were certain that every child that was born would be struck with this disease, it would still be a mitzvah to have children. The mitzvah puravu is not only to have children that are perfectly healthy. The mitzvah is to bring people into the world, to inhabit, cause the world to be inhabited. Every child you bring into the world, first of all, everybody knows there's a mitzvah puravu, which is minimum one boy and one girl, and beyond that, there's another mitzvah of sheves, to cause the world to be inhabited. Every child is a tremendous mitzvah, even beyond puravu. So says Rav Moshe, there's no inyan that specifically the children have to be in perfect health. And if a person wants to marry a woman and she's willing to marry the guy with a condition, then he should do so. Says Rav Moshe, but if nobody wants to marry the guy, so he's an oinus. He's an oinus. What could he do? Then he doesn't have a choice. But one thing we see from Rav Moshe is that if a person happens to know about their personal condition, they have a moral obligation not to hide it, not to cover it up, but to divulge it to the other party, because otherwise it's trickery, it's aina. Okay? So that's where we start from. But the more sensitive issue is when we're not dealing with the person themselves, we're dealing with the doctor. Now, some of these cases to me sound a little bit archaic, because I don't think that's the way it works anymore. But let's start with the following case. Sha'al Sechuvas Shevet Halevi, Rav Shmuel Halevi Vazner. Here you have a young girl, and she has a certain condition. So you'll tell me the name of the condition. It doesn't say. Yeah? All her hair fell out. We're not talking about a terminal illness. It's a condition, all her hair fell out.
Alopecia.
What?
Alopecia.
Alopecia, exactly. That's exactly what I was thinking. Right? But you have to tell me about this. It says in 3 or 4 years the hair is going to grow back. Does that fit the bill? No. So you see, I don't know either. You don't know. Okay, but it's some kind of condition. She doesn't have any hair. Luckily, she went to Central Avenue. She got the most beautiful sheitel that nobody would know that she doesn't have hair. She's going out with the guy. The guy doesn't know it's a sheitel. He thinks it's the real thing. Otherwise, she's in peak of health. Does she need to tell the guy? That I happen to be bald like an eagle? Or could she basically keep it to herself, and he'll find out after the chasana that it's just a sheitel. It's not the real thing. So this shaila was brought to the Shevet Halevi. Now there are two shailas. You would say, well, it depends where she lives. If he's coming from Williamsburg, and anyway after the wedding, she's going to shave her head. So Mali before Mali, you would think there's no nafkamina. Well, we're going to see. Says the Shevet Halevi. There's a Mishnah in Ksubis. The Mishnah says that any mum that passes a kohen from doing the avodah in the Beis HaMikdash would render a woman a mekach ta'as in marriage. So, for example, if a kohen who's missing an arm couldn't do the avodah, so a woman who purports to have 2 arms and really is missing an arm, it would be a mekach ta'as. And then the Mishnah adds, there are certain mumen that even though do not passel a man from doing the avodah, would passel a woman. And they are, if bad breath, or bad odor, or excessive sweating, or a very heavy voice. However, the Mishnah does not talk about baldness. However, if you look in Bechayros, Daf Mem Gimel, it says like this about a kohen. A kohen that not only is bald, even less than that, a kohen whose hairline goes from ear to ear. In other words, a regular hairline goes from temple to temple, but if a person has a receding hairline, it goes from ear to ear. A kohen who's basically bald in the front can't do the avodah. The pella. It's considered a mum for the avodah. Says the Mishnah that a kohen who has that extent of a receding hairline is pasul for the avodah. If so, says the Shevet HaLevi, then certainly a woman who doesn't have any hair at all, it would be a mekach tos, and therefore she would be required to let the prospective chassan know about it. But says the Shevet HaLevi, even if she has just a receding hairline, which is really a suffix in the Yerushalmi, for a woman, would be considered a mum. And therefore, says the Shevet HaLevi, I don't see how she can't let the guy know about it. And even if you're going to say, well, she lives in a community where after the marriage, she's going to be shaving her head anyway, so what's the nafkamina? Well, it says the Shevet HaLevi, bottom line is that even if he's never going to see it, it says in the Mishnah, in Bechayros, that baldness is a mum that would disqualify a kohen and would render a woman a mekach tos. And therefore, says the Shevet HaLevi, I don't really see how you could get around it. He says, amazingly, she would not be able to cover it up. Literally, figuratively, she would have to basically divulge the information to the prospective chassan. However, says the Shevet HaLevi, she is entitled to play it smart. And that is, she should not reveal it right away. Let them go out 2 dates. First you go to the Brooklyn Marriott, I forgot all the halachas, and then you go to my favorite dessert, I don't remember exactly all the chukim, but after date number 2, when there's already something going, that's when she could break the news, and at that point maybe the guy won't mind as much. Okay. Now let's talk about something a little bit more serious. Let's talk about the doctor. Somebody goes to the doctor says, hey pal, you can't really see. You can't see where you're going. You drive? The guy says, yeah, of course I drive. Doctor says, I don't really think it's safe. You could barely see. You're colorblind. You can't even see 10 feet in front of you. It's really not a good idea. The guy says, don't worry, I've been driving for the last 70 years, nothing happened. Should the doctor then divulge the information to the authorities and have the guy's license rescinded? Or says the doctor, look, that's not my job. My job is to treat the patient, and that's what I'm doing, and otherwise I'll mind my own business. But the first shiloh we need to get to, and I don't know exactly how it works, is the following. When a doctor is initiated as a doctor, they take some kind of oath. They take a shvuah. What is it called? The Hippocratic oath? Now, part of that oath, do they swear to be faithful to and confidential to the information that the patient gives, or is that separate? Is that like a legality of the HIPAA laws? It's a legality. Was there ever a point in history where a doctor took an oath that they're not going to divulge? It seems like there was. At least in Israel, it seems like there is some kind of oath. Maybe part of the Hippocratic oath is that they swear not to divulge information. So here, the doctor is faced with the following dilemma. The doctor knows information about a patient, and he's summoned by the government. He's summoned by the federal government to come testify against somebody. So on the one hand, the government wants him to testify. On the other hand, the doctor, as part of his initiation, apparently took an oath. I hereby remain faithful to my client, to my patient. I will not divulge information. So on the one hand, he has an oath to his patient. On the other hand, he has legal responsibilities. He has moral responsibilities to society. What should he do? Says the Tzitz Eliezer. Now you have to know the Tzitz Eliezer was Reb Tzvi, Rabbi Eliezer Yehuda of Waldenberg. He was the preeminent posek, the posek of Shari Tzedek Hospital, and he specialized in medical shilas, medical ethical shilas. And he says, look, if someone takes an oath, let's say a guy says, I take an oath that I'm going to talk by Chazar Sashatz. So he comes to davening. The rabbi's going to blow it. The guy's talking by Chazar Sashatz. He says, what do you want from me? I took an oath. I took a shvuah. Is he bound by that oath? Of course not. He swore to be mevatel a mitzvah. He swore to do an avera. If somebody swears to do an avera, the shvuah is not chal. Because he's mujba ve'oimed me Har Sinai. He already swore in Har Sinai, he's going to keep the Torah. So if somebody swears to violate an avera, the shvuah is not chal. So here this doctor swore that he's not going to divulge information. Yeah, but under these conditions, under these circumstances, it would be an avera for the doctor to keep it to himself. The doctor knows information about this guy, that this guy is a menace to society. So if he's going to keep the information confidential, he's basically harming society. So any oath that he made to keep that confidential is not binding. It's not an oath. The shvuah is not chal. And therefore, says the Tzitz Eliezer, he quotes the Ramah paskins that if someone swears not to divulge information that could potentially save somebody's life, save somebody's money, he's not required to keep the oath. The oath is not chal. So therefore, says the Tzitz Eliezer, the doctor would be required to tell. But then he says, wait a second. The doctor never, now listen carefully, the doctor never swore specifically, I swear that I'm not going to divulge information that could be beneficial to society. He took a general oath. It's called a shvuah koileles. He took a general oath. He will not divulge information. Now, in most circumstances, that oath is actually very admirable, right? By the way, you know, the halacha is if somebody tells you something in privacy, you're not allowed to tell somebody. Even if they don't tell you, I'm telling you this and this, don't tell anybody. It's halacha. The halacha is not just professionally. Obviously, if you're a doctor, you're an attorney, you're a rabbi, you're a clergy, and if somebody tells you information, you may not divulge it to anybody else. Sometimes people ask, what's going on with that person? I can't really say. Can't say. Professionally, you're not allowed to say. In almost all professions. But even halachically, if somebody tells you something in privacy, even if they don't say, please do me a favor, I don't want anybody to know about it, you're not halachically allowed to say. It's considered lashon hara. But so in most cases, it's admirable for a doctor to abide by this oath that he took, not to divulge information. It happens to be there are limited circumstances where not divulging the information is harmful to society. So says the Tzitz Eliezer, we should say the following. Since the shvuah is chal for most cases, it should be chal for even cases where not divulging it is harmful for society. Why? Because there's a cloud. Once the shvuah is chal, once it takes effect, once it evolves on certain situations, it would be effective for all situations, even though those particular situations are actually an avera. In other words, if he would swear specifically, I will not divulge information that can be beneficial to save people, that is an oath that's directed at an avera. But he didn't do that. He took a general oath. And such an oath is chal. But says it Tzitz Eliezer, even though it's chal, but it was an avera for the doctor to swear for those circumstances. And therefore, we should assume that the oath that the doctor takes, he specifically had in mind to exclude remaining confidential for situations where it could be beneficial to society. And says it Tzitz Eliezer, even if we're not sure if the doctor meant to exclude such situations, fine, so the doctor swore he's not going to divulge under any conditions. There's a concept, you could be mater shvuah. The same way you could be mater neder, you could be mater shvuah. So if a doctor knows about a guy that he's a menace to society, he should go to a beis din of 3 and say, I swore that I'm not going to divulge information, but under these circumstances, I gotta let the world know that this guy is, bipolar, that this guy is schizophrenic, that this guy is a maniac. And then he'll matter the neder, and then he has to tell people that. Or this guy can't see. How could he drive? How could he not tell the authorities? So therefore, says the Tzitz Eliezer, in his opinion, not only is the doctor permitted to divulge information, first of all, the shvuah is probably not chal under those circumstances. And even if it's chal, he should be mater the shvuah. Says the Tzitz Eliezer, this would give us some insight into the following scenario. Some hospitals are teaching hospitals. So the doctor will go to somebody's bed and say, how are you feeling? Oh, I'm not feeling good. What's wrong? I have a big rash. The doctor says, really? Let me see. So the guy shows the rash. The doctor then calls in 10 residents. Come in. They all surround the guy. Yeah? And everybody's, looking at the poor guy, is embarrassed. He's embarrassed out of his mind. He thought only his particular doctor is looking. Meanwhile, he became, science experiment. How could the doctor call in the student, but he took the Hippocratic oath that he's not going to divulge confidential information? Says it Tzitz Eliezer, because obviously the doctor, when he took the oath, he had in mind that he's going to be allowed to show other students, because that's part of the process. That's how hospitals work. And then Tzitz Eliezer adds another idea, that there's a concept umi talmida yoser mikulam, that especially in learning, you learn a lot from your teachers, you learn more from your friends, and you learn the most from your students. Well, says it Tzitz Eliezer, this is true in any discipline. The most you learn is from your students. So when this doctor calls in the residents to learn, and he's explaining to them the intricacies of this particular case, the doctor himself is getting the case clearer, and he'll be able to treat the patient better. So you can make the case that this is in the best interest of the patient as well. But otherwise, says it Tzitz Eliezer, something very interesting, and that is the doctor should really get the permission of the patient if he wants to use the patient as some kind of experiment. Because it's interesting, it says by the Metzora, Ulahayrais, B'yayim hatamai u'v'yayim hatar, that the Kohen who's paskening on the Metzora is teaching, Ulahayrais. And then it says, Zois tia Torahs ha-Metzora. So the Netziv in the Hamakdara says, what does it mean, Ulahayrais? It means like this, that normally you would think, if somebody comes to the Kohen, hey Kohen, I have a negat. So the Kohen says, where is it? The guy says, I'd rather not say. The Kohen says, well look, we got to do this. So the guy is embarrassed, he shows the Kohen the negat. Could the Kohen then call in, his high school class and say, come, we're just learning a saras, you wouldn't believe I have a specimen. And all these, 10, 15-year-old kids come in. Could the Kohen, call in his Talmidim? Yeah, he could. It says l'hayros. He's allowed to teach. But that's why the Torah says, Zois tia Torahs ha-Metzora, that this is a special Gzeres HaKosov, that for tsaras, the Kohen is allowed to use the Metzora as a specimen. But that implies only regarding tsaras, not regarding any other venue, any other area. Bottom line, the Tzitz Eliezer says, the oath that a doctor took is not binding. Even if it is, you need to be matter it. And a doctor must divulge confidential information if it's in the best interest of somebody else or in the best interest of society. Tell you another case. Okay, we're going to do two more cases. This is Shaus Teshuvas Chelkas Yaakov. Any other doctors here? No? Okay. So here's the following case. Now I don't know how this is possible even. 20-year-old guy, Rachmana Litzlan, he has Yena Machla, he has cancer. And the family doesn't know about it. The doctors did not want to shake up the family. But oddly, the doctors did not tell the patient. Doesn't make any sense. As far as I know, in the 30s there was a big scandal, with syphilis, where doctors didn't tell patients about their illness because they wanted to see how the disease developed on its own. But I don't think that's legal in the United States of America, but maybe this is taking place in Antwerp. Maybe there are different medical ethics over there. For whatever reason, the case is the patient did not know they were sick with this illness. Meanwhile, the guy's engaged. The doctors know the guy doesn't have a year or two left to live. And the question is, if the Kala is going to know about it, obviously she's not going to be interested in marrying the guy. What is the responsibility of the doctor? Should the doctor tell the Kala, by the way, I happen to know your Chassan, his life expectancy is 1 to 2 years? Or should he just basically mind his own business? Well, says Rabbi Yaakov Breish, the following. Let's look at number 6. The Rambam says, I'll read to you his words, if you see your friend drowning in the sea, or you see a wild animal about to attack him, or you hear Goyim want to harm somebody, and you know about it, and you don't tell your friend, you're violating the lav in the Torah, Loi samoid al dam reyecha. Do not stand by idly when your friend's blood is about to spill. Yeah? But then the Rambam and the Shulchan Aruch add the following 3 words. Ukiyoitse bidvarim elu, or any similar situation. Says the Chelkas Yaakov, what is the Rambam, what is the Shulchan Aruch adding by saying the words Ukiyoitse bidvarim elu? Says Rabbi Yaakov Breish, in my opinion, it is clear what the Rambam, what the Shulchan Aruch is adding, is that any time you know that somebody is about to be harmed, and you could stop it, and you could prevent it, and you don't. You just say, look, it's America. Live and let live. It's a free country. I mind my own business. You are violating the law of Lifnai of Lo Yisamay Adam Rayecha. Says Rabbi Yaakov Breish, is there any situation where somebody is about to be harmed more than when they're about to marry someone whose life expectancy is a year or two? How could you allow someone to go into that situation? And therefore, my opinion is, he says, the doctor is required to divulge this information to the Kala. More than that, not only if you don't divulge are you over Leisamar Adam Reyacha, you're over another lav. Lifnei Iver Loisitein Mechshal. Listen carefully. Everybody knows that if somebody comes to you for advice, you know, here we're a shul in 5 towns, we're young guys, we're looking for a rabbi, what do you think of this guy, what do you think of that guy? Everybody knows if you give people bad advice, you're over a lav in the Torah. Somebody comes to you, you know, where should I buy this? Where should I get a car? And you advise him to go to the biggest crook in the world. He's going to give it a lemon. You're over a lav in the Torah. You cannot give somebody bad advice. You got to steer somebody right. More than that, you see somebody about to do an avera and you facilitate it. You're over a lav. What's the halacha if you see somebody about to go shop in a bad store where he's about to get ripped off? And you don't give him bad advice to shop there, but you refrain from giving him good advice not to shop there. You hear the distinction, right? Obvious distinction. You can't give someone bad advice. But what if you refrain from giving somebody good advice? The opinion of the Mishnah Lamelech is as follows. If you refrain from sticking your nose in, and you say, why should I give the guy good advice? I mean, it's a free country, let him do what he wants. The opinion of the Mishnah Melech is, you're over, lifnei iver, leisitei mechshon. And the raya is, we know that if you facilitate someone from doing an avera, you're over, lifnei iver. What if you see someone about to do an avera, and you don't stop them? So here I am, I'm standing by, I'm during Chazar Sashatz, and I'm minding my own business. And the guy next to me is talking. I should stop him. Why should I stop him? He wants to burn. Let him burn. Let him be a barbecue. Shish kebab. If he wants to be in a bad place, let him go. Why do I have to stop him? It's a free country. I'm a good guy. He's a bad guy. Am I over a lav lifnei iver loisitei mechshal? If I don't advise him, hey pal, you want to have a good life? You want to have a bad life? The halacha is you got to stop him. In fact, interestingly, if you see a guy about to graft, let's say, an apple onto an orange tree, which is klayim, a guy's not allowed to do that. If you don't stop the guy, you're over lifnei iver leisitei mechshal. So we see from here that not only is giving bad advice lifnei iver leisitei mechshal, refraining from giving good advice is also lifnei iver leisitei mechshal. You know a shul is looking for a rabbi. You have a great idea. You say, well, it's not my problem. If you are in a position to give good advice, you're required to offer it. And therefore, in this situation, says the Rabbi Yaakov Breish, you see the Kala, and you see she's about to marry this guy, and you know that the guy is terminally ill. First of all, you're required to tell her why, because lo yisamid adam riyach, how can you sit by idly when her life is about to be ruined? And number two, you have the opportunity to give good advice. Don't marry the guy, and you don't do it, you're over lifnei iver leisitei mechshal. Now, a very important nafkamina is, what if you know a guy is about to marry a woman, you know she's terminally ill? Could you allow the guy to marry a woman who's terminally ill? So you say, Lo yisamid adam reyecha. Lo yisamid adam reyecha does not apply to a Gentile, he's not reyecha. But lifnei iver does apply. And if you don't give him good advice, maybe you can make the case you're over a lav in the Torah. Can you imagine? But it's not so clear. So let's worry about the Jewish people, says Rabbi Yaakov Breish. Come to the Jewish people, if you're a doc, you know somebody is terminally ill, you better not only dive. But what if they say, please don't say? What could you do? You have to say. Now, there's an issue that we're sort of skirting. And that is, in the United States of America, if a professional divulges confidential information, they will lose their license, or they seriously can lose their license. Does a doctor have to jeopardize his entire career not to violate the law of Lo Yisam Adam Reacha? That's where I would offer maybe a novel idea. But again, the opinion of the Tzitz Eliezer and Rabbi Yaakov Breish is the doctor must divulge. Let's go a little further. Look at number 7. This we discussed briefly. Here you have a guy, he can't see what's in front of him. He doesn't know if he's in a shul, he doesn't know if he's in the pizza store, he doesn't know if he's coming or he's going. And he goes to the doctor. The doctor says, your cataracts are so thick, you're ba'av he'anon your whole life, you don't know where you're going. You drive? He says, sure I drive. And now I drive 80 miles an hour. Does the doctor now have to call up the DMV or call up the police department and say, just, for your information, you might consider revoking this guy's license? Says the Tzitz Eliezer, no question. The doctor is obligated to call the authorities and say, look, you're issuing a license to a guy who's, he's basically in jeopardizing anyone who is on the road's life while he's driving. You have to say. Says, what if the guy comes to you and says, look, doc, don't tell anybody. I'll take care of it. I will go to the authorities and I'll let them know. And the doctor is not so confident that he's telling the truth. What about in that situation? Does the doctor really have to sort of stick his nose in and make sure? Yes, absolutely, says it. If somebody's a menace to society, you can't be an ostrich, you can't stick your head in the sand and say, live and let live. The doctor has a moral responsibility and obligation to divulge the information. And then Tzitz Eliezer quotes the Pischei Tshuva. Pischei Tshuva says a very frightening thing, and I'm hesitant to say it, but it's got to be said. Pischei Tshuva says like this, every sefer in the world, Lashon Hara, it's the biggest Aveira, you can't badmouth someone, it's Lashon Hara, it's Lashon Hara. Says the Pischei Tshuva, how about a worse Aveira? How about the Aveira of all the people that know information about others, and they don't say it, and they let people fall into the trap? Yeah, it's a great shidduch, I have such a great shidduch. This guy, he's the nicest guy in the world. He's a serial killer. He's a psychopath. Yeah, is he mentally stable? Yeah, relative to everybody else. Says the Pischei Tshuva, before people are worried about Lashon Hara, the bigger Avera they need to worry about is Lo Yisam Adam Reacha. But really, this is a very frightening thing, because you're really walking on a tightrope. Because if you divulge information that should not be divulged, you could destroy someone for no good reason. And if you don't divulge information, you could be destroying the other party. So this is a very, very serious question of, pikuach nefashos. We're at such a situation, you got to ask a competent authority, what do I do under the circumstances? So, interestingly, the Chafetz Chaim points out, look at number 9, amazingly, you have two azharos in one pasuk. It says, Lo yiselech Rachel b'yamecha, don't be a talebearer. And in the very same pasuk, it says, Lo yisamed adam reyacha, don't stand by idly. In other words, these are the flip sides of the coin. You have to know when to apply what. You have to know when you seal your mouth, you close your mouth, you don't say. Somebody wants to know, is this a good shidduch? Yeah. I don't know. The guy's an accountant. He's only making $90,000 a year. That people like to say. That's something to say. So what? He'll be a good father, he'll be a good spouse, he'll be able to, put it together. So he won't be a millionaire. That's not something to say. Yeah, he's a great guy, but he's not athletic. Well, what's that got to do with a shidduch? And sometimes people know information about somebody. They're not mentally stable, and people hide it. That's the problem of Lo Yisam Adam Reacha.
But the advice is subject to the person giving the advice. It's the opinion of the giver.
Yeah, so look, it has to be objective information. It can't be subjective to opinion. Because opinion is,
So then you don't have a chiyuv to give it over. If it's an opinion, if someone called you...
If you think the guy is a psychopath, or you think the guy is dangerous, it's a very difficult...
So then you have to give your opinion. If I'm calling you for your opinion because you know him better than I do, I'm calling you for a reason.
Yeah.
Then that's the shayla.
It's a very difficult shayla. It's a very difficult. Look, certain things are clinical. Yes or no. So that kind of question, you say, look, I'm not a professional. I can't evaluate the person's mental status. You need to, if you have any reason to be suspicious, have the person tested. That's something you could sort of skirt the issue. But, it's a difficult thing. Okay, so the final case, and then I'm going to bring up maybe a contrary viewpoint, is a very rare, unfortunate situation where there's a young girl, and she was 19 years old, and she came to the OBGYN, and she said, I don't understand what's going on. I haven't been regular. Haven't had my cycle. And they look into it, and sure enough, no kidding, she doesn't have the kalim. She doesn't have the system even. She didn't have a womb. She didn't have a proisdar. If you want to know what those words mean, you'll look it up after. She didn't have the physical kalim to be able to bear children and to have relations. So she went to the surgeon, and they built for her plastic surgery. They built for her what's necessary for her to have proper faculties to live together as husband and wife, but without any hope of her ever being able to have children. And she tells the doctor, do me a favor, don't tell anybody about it, because I'll never be able to get married. And here the doctor knows this information, and the doctor knows the woman's not capable of bearing children. What does the doctor do under these circumstances? Says it to Eliezer, there's no greater situation. How could a doctor remain silent and allow someone to marry the person not capable of having children? So now the Tzitz Eliezer says, well, what's the big deal? He'll figure it out after a year or two, and what he'll do is he'll be mavato the kedushin. Says the Tzitz Eliezer, he could divorce her, but you need a divorce, because he didn't marry her on condition she doesn't have movement, and therefore he's going to need a divorce. So says Eliezer, fine, so he'll divorce her. Says Eliezer, like we learned by Shalosh Shudas, you can't just divorce somebody. It's not really an option. And even if it is under these circumstances, it's not so easy to get a divorce. And the woman could pull shtick. He'll say, I want to give you a divorce. She won't show up that day. She won't show up the next week. She'll say, I'm crazy, you can't give me a divorce. She'll pull shtick. He won't be able to do it. So he'll get a heter meir rabbanim. You know how difficult it is to pull that off? Says the Tzitz Eliezer, the doctor has a moral responsibility to let the guy know about it. Of course he has to say. He says like this. He says, you know how much... First of all, he says, the guy could be married a year, 2 years. He's not even going to know. He's not going to know. It will take time. Why aren't things working? Why isn't anything happening? And then she'll say, I don't know, I went to the doctor. Who knows how long it will drag out for? And therefore the doctor is morally responsible to tell the husband, look, things over here are not beseder. What if they're already engaged? Says it to Eliezer, it doesn't matter if they're already engaged. The doctor has to go to the guy and say, do you know what you're getting into? But he's going to break the shidduch. So be it. You can't let the poor guy go into such a thing. The Chafetz Chaim says that once they're engaged, you need 2 edim. Says it to Eliezer, no problem. The doctor, and then let the doctor show medical records. That will be the second aid. And if not, says Tzitz Eliezer, obviously there was a surgery. No doctor ever performed surgery by himself. There's definitely 2 edim. You have 2 edim over here. And unfortunately, it says it Tzitz Eliezer, this is the halacha. He concludes as follows. My opinion is, the doctor is obligated to let the bacher, and by the way, vice versa, let's say a doctor knows about a young man that he's not capable. The doctor has the moral obligation of revealing this information. However, my advice is, you go over to the girl and say, look, I know you don't want me to say anything, but I have a moral obligation. So I just want you to know that I am now going to divulge the information. Chances are, if she knows that, she'll divulge it on her own, so she should not be, to avoid the embarrassment of having the doctor divulge it. This is the psak of the Tzitz Eliezer in at least 3 places. That a doctor has the moral obligation. It doesn't matter if he swore, the shvu is not chal. It doesn't matter if the person trusted him. The doctor has responsibility. Lo yisamid adam reyacha. Now, is this going to work in the United States of America? I have 2 questions, and I want you to think about it. And this is the following. 2 contrary arguments. Basically, what the doctor is doing, at least in the United States of America, is he's jeopardizing his career. If you have a doctor who divulges personal information, if the person who is harmed tells the authorities, hey, my doctor knew private information about it, and he told somebody, so basically, this person now could become a plumber, an electrician. They ain't going to be a doctor anymore. Their license will be revoked. That's like law number 1. The HIPAA laws is like the biggest, the most important mitzvah in America. Laws of confidentiality. So does the doctor have to give up his job to protect another person from damage? So basically what it comes down to is, what avera is the doctor doing by not divulging? Lo yisamid adam reyacha. So I ask you, and you need to know this, how much money do you need to give up to keep the Torah? How much money? For example, do you have to give up your life to keep the Torah? No, only the big 3. You have to give up your life not to kill somebody, you have to give up your life not to commit adultery, you have to give up your life not to serve idols. But let's say somebody says, don't put on tefillin. So fine, you don't have to put on tefillin that day. Don't sin in the sukkah, so you don't sin in the sukkah. Eat pig. Esk is into hate, you eat the pig, what can you do? You don't have to give up your life to keep the Torah, only the big 3. Do I have to give up all my money to keep the Torah? Or is there a cap, salary cap? The answer is, it depends for which mitzvah. A lav, you need to give up all your money. So somebody says, eat pig, otherwise you're going to lose all your money, you got to lose all your money. We are shatnez, otherwise you're going to lose your money, you lose all your money. Even in mitzvah d'rabbanan, someone says, speak by chazar sashatz, otherwise I'm going to take away all your money. You can't talk. You have to give up every penny not to violate a lav, even a lav d'rabbanan. But to be mekayim a mitzvah d'oraisa, there's a salary cap. You only have to give up 1/5 of your money. In other words, let's say you make $100,000. Let's say you have $100,000, and tefillin costs $21,000. You don't have to buy tefillin. Let's say you make $100,000, and the sukkah costs $21,000. You don't have to buy the sukkah. You do not have to spend more than 1/5 of your money on a mitzvah d'oraisa. That's the Ramah writes in look at number 12. The Ramah in Arachaim Sim Tafresh Nun Vav. Someone who doesn't have an esrog or another mitzvah, you don't have to spend all your money, you only have to spend 1/5. However, only a mitzvah saseh. But a mitzvah loy saseh, you gotta give up all your money. So I ask you a very simple question. What's the difference? You gotta keep God's Torah, you don't have to keep God's Torah. Is the Torah important or is it not important? Why when it comes to a lav, do you have to give up all your money, and when it comes to naseh, you only have to give up 1/5 of your money? What's the logic? The Rashba says in Bava Kama, listen very carefully, the logic is like this. If Hashem says not to do something, actively violating it is such a chutzpah, to do a maisa against Hashem, you got to give up all your money, not to eat chazer, not to wear shanis, not to talk by chazer. To do an act against Hashem, how could you do that? You got to give all your money. But if God says do something, and look, I'm not going against Hashem. Hashem said to wear tefillin. I'm just passively not wearing tefillin. So I'm not doing an action against Hashem. So it's only passive, it's shev al tasa. That's not as terrible, you only have to give up 1/5. So think very carefully. When it comes to lo yisamid adam reyacha, it's a lav. Yeah? So you would think what? You have to give up all your money. So if a doctor would lose his career if he divulges the information, so be it, you would say, right? He should lose his job, he can't violate a lav in the Torah, lo yisamid adam reyacha, right? Wait a second. It's the only lav that you violated b'shav al taseh. You get this? If you get this, you're going to be a happy man. You got to use your brain sometimes. Again, the distinction between an aseh and a lo yisaseh. In aseh, you violate passively, you only have to give up 1/5 of your money. A lo yisaseh, you violate actively, so you have to give up all your money. But if we could conjure up a lav that you violate passively. Maybe you don't have to give up all your money not to violate that lav. Lo yisameid al dam reyecha is one exception where it's a lav, but you violate it passively. Maybe you only have to give up a fifth of your money not to violate it. Rabbi Akiva Eger on Shulchan Aruch writes that since the distinction between a lav and aseh is a lav you violate actively, and aseh you violate passive, look at number 14, Hinei midivrei tshuvas chavos yoyer, from the chavos yoyer it's mashma, that if you have a lav she'ein boi ma'aseh, it's like an aseh and you don't have to give up all your money. So I was always wondering, then why does it Tzitz Eliezer say that you need to divulge information to save somebody? If you're giving up your job, if you're jeopardizing your job, in my opinion, in my humble opinion, a job is the equivalent of at least a fifth of your money. I would say for most people. Even if your salary, your yearly salary, is less than a fifth of your money, but if you lose your career entirely, whether it's 3 years, whether it's 5 years, or 10 years, for most people, that's a fifth of your money. A job has the value, I would think, of at least a fifth of your money. And therefore, lo yisameid al dam reyecha is the one lav that you violate passively. So for that, maybe you only have to give up a fifth of your money. So why does the Tzitz Eliezer say you need to divulge information? You're jeopardizing your career. Maybe you don't have to do that. That would be my humble question. Now, Rabbi Akiva Eger brings another opinion, that loy plug. For a lavin, you need to give up all your money. It doesn't matter whether it happens to be a lav that's yesh by maisa or ein by maisa. Maybe you make the case, the Rivash says, loy plug. But the tzad of the Chavos Yoyer seems to be very reasonable and logical. I'll give you another illustration of it very quickly, and then we'll conclude. The Shita of the Rashba is that every time you don't fulfill an aseh, you violate the lav of loy sigra. In other words, if I don't put on tefillin, not only do I violate an aseh of not wearing tefillin, I also violate the lav of don't detract from the Torah. If that's the case, so then why don't I always have to give up all my money to fulfill mitzvahs aseh, because every aseh has a lav? The answer is because when I don't put on the tefillin, I'm only violating bal sigra passively. So it's no stronger than a regular aseh because it's just a lav that I violate b'shav tasa. That's what the Stipler writes in the Berachas Paras. So it seems like this is a very sound argument. And I always was bothered on the Tzitz Eliezer, why would a doctor have to jeopardize his job? L'chayra, the value of it is more than a fifth of one's assets, one's money. Why would a doctor have to jeopardize his job? And there's another svara, I think I heard it recently from Rav Asher Weiss, and Bli Neder, we're going to revisit this topic one day, whether it's Shabbos or sometime in the future, and that is you can make the following case. If a doctor is now going to be forced to divulge confidential information, you're weakening the entire institution of medicine. Here you have a guy, should I go to the doctor or should I not go? I don't know if I should go to the psychiatrist, psychologist, doctor. After all, it's not safe. Maybe he's going to tell somebody. Yeah, let's keep things under the rug. People won't go to the doctor. People will be afraid to go to the doctor. People won't be able to, or they'll go to the doctor, but they won't say anything. And the doctor won't be able to treat people properly. So maybe you can make the case that if a doctor divulges information, it's in a way pikuach nefashos to many, many people. Many people won't go to doctors. Many people won't divulge information to doctors. They'll always be scared. You know, what's going to be if my situation affects somebody else? So maybe then, again, I'm not arguing Chas v'Shalom and Tzitz Eliezer, I'm merely advancing an argument, and I believe I heard it from Rav Asher Weiss, but I hope to revisit the subject, giving you something to think about, that the doctor perhaps maybe would have the right to say, look, if I tell this bacher that so-and-so is terminally ill, yes, I'm saving this person from lifelong agony. On the other hand, there are repercussions the other way. Now, what if somebody comes to that doctor and says, you know, I was considering going out with this guy. Is everything okay? Maybe I'm a little suspicious. What would the doctor say then? Maybe the doctor has the right. The doctor would not have the right to say, you know, he's in the peak of health. Yesterday he run the he ran the marathon in 4.3 seconds. He couldn't lie. But maybe the doctor said, look, even if something was wrong, I wouldn't be able to tell you. That's a very powerful answer. So, Rabbi say these are very sensitive issues. Anytime a person is called for shidduchim, if you know information and you don't know what to do, don't make up something. Don't say, I don't know, and just act. You need to think through it carefully. You need to ask a shaila. It says in Mishlei, Chayim v'hamavis biyad halashen. Life and death rest in your tongue. You have to know when to talk, and when you have to talk, you gotta talk. And you have to know when to keep quiet. You have to know when to fulfill loiseach racha ba'amecha. This is a very, very tenuous and sensitive issue, and a person in such circumstances needs to get the proper guidance. Thank you everyone for coming. Have a great evening.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.